Hello, everyone, and welcome back. This is Enthusiastical History. You are listening to our new bonus episode, Post Roman Politics and Religion. In episode 2, we've mentioned the name Franks quite a few times. We've talked about how a Frankish queen, Bertha, affected the success of St. Augustine's mission to the Kingdom of Kent, and then we talked about the loss of significance of Kent under King Eadbald, which might have had something to do with the fact that Eadbald lost Frankish support, and these might have naturally raised some questions in your heads, questions such as who are the Franks? And why were they important? Why were their support so important? To answer these questions, again, we have to look at the collapse of the Roman Empire. Let's go back in time to the year 457. Majorian, a Roman commander, defeats the Western Emperor in battle and seizes the throne. The empire he overtakes, however, is a mess. By this point, the empire's old capital, the city to which all roads led, the Eternal City, Rome, had been sacked not once, but twice, first by Visigoths in 410, and then again in 455, this time by Vandals, just 2 years prior to Majorian's ascension to the throne. Long gone were the days of Roman legions asserting imperial authority in faraway corners of the world. The empire had been increasingly relying on barbarian mercenaries and commanders. The last emperors of the Western Empire were emperors only in name, all of them puppets of barbarian commanders, or worse yet, foreign barbarian kings. It was under these circumstances Majorian seized the imperial throne. He was the Roman emperor, but his empire consisted only of Italy, Western Gaul, and parts of Illyria. Majorian proved to be a capable ruler. He campaigned constantly against various enemies of the empire and managed to establish imperial authority over lost regions. Just as he was planning an invasion of North Africa to retake the empire's breadbasket, he was assassinated on the orders of a Germanic general, Ricimer. Majorian was one of the last Romans in history. The emperors that came after him were all puppets, either of barbarians or of Eastern Roman emperors. With his death, the last hope was lost for Rome. From now on, it would be all downhill. His story naturally sparks many questions and many what ifs, but that is for another day. To us, what matters is the aftermath of his death. Ricimer, the man behind Majorian's assassination, installed his own puppet on the throne as the new emperor. Aegidus, Magister Militum of Gaul, or if you were to translate it in a way that you could understand, the military governor of Gaul and a friend of Majorian, refused to acknowledge the new emperor and thus rebelled. He kept threatening to invade Italy and to dethrone the new emperor. However, he wasn't able to do so since he had to defend Gaul from constant barbarian attacks. And so a new breakaway Roman state was formed in northwestern Gaul, and it is known today as the Kingdom of Saxons. I butchered the pronunciation probably, but excuse my French. Now, we don't know if he ever intended to become a king, but whether he wanted or not, Aegidus was seen as such by the tribes around him. He was successful in defending Gaul. He recaptured some land and defeated an army of Visigoths in the Battle of Orleans. Soon after the battle, he died and was replaced by his son, Sigarus. Sigarus continued doing his father's work and governed the province until the year 486. In that year he fought with and was defeated by Clovis's Franks. After his victory, King Clovis annexed the Saxons and kept fighting both other Frankish leaders and Visigoths to establish his rule over Gaul, and in that he was successful. And this mighty king was baptized just 3 years before his death, and with him his Franks were converted too. By the time he died, Clovis was ruling over a majority of Gaul, and his kingdom was the strongest of the post-Roman barbarian kingdoms. It would later be known as Merovingian Empire, and this Merovingian Empire of Clovis was ready to collect the inheritance of Rome. Yeah, so that is basically the story of Clovis and how Francia came to be. And the Franks didn't just appear out of nowhere. They actually migrated to the other side of the Rhine, to the Gaulish side of the Rhine, sometime before their invasion, and they were, recruited into the Roman army. So they fought. There were Frankish commanders, Frankish officers within the Roman army, and these guys sometimes fought for the Romans as auxiliaries, and other times fought against them, and so on, until the time of Clovis, when when the Roman authority was totally lost, and there was just a Roman breakaway state, which clearly wasn't strong enough to stop them. So Clovis saw an opportunity, and he just swept in and took over the kingdom of Soissons. Man, I love pronouncing that word, or at least trying to pronounce that word. Anyway, so he swept in, he overtook the kingdom, annexed it, and then he fought several other Frankish lords to assume total control over the Franks, and then he beat the Visigoths back to Hispania. He pushed them there to modern day Spain. Having dealt with all of that, Clovis was now the strongest man in Western Europe. And he was in a good position, and as I said, he was ready to collect the inheritance of Rome, of Western Rome, or at least parts of it, parts of its culture. I mean, and after some time, the Franks, or as it is known today for the era, the Merovingian Empire, was the strongest and most prestigious kingdom, or rather empire, let's say state, in Western Europe, and it was in some ways the continuity of the successor, I should say, of Western Roman Empire. But how did this happen? Well, there were several factors leading to this result, and the first factor we're going to talk about is religion. So, as you know, Clovis converted a few years before his death to Christianity. Now, he wasn't the only barbarian king who converted to Christianity. In fact, almost all of these barbarian kingdoms who now inhabited Roman provinces of old converted to Christianity. But there was a difference. Yes, all of these other barbarians were Christians, just like Clovis. However, they were different kind of Christians. Uh, it's kind of complex, but I'm going to try and simplify it as much as I can. So here's the deal. Constantine the Great, right? The Roman emperor who made the Christianity the official religion of the Roman Empire. Well, uh, he held a council in Nicaea, and he invited all the bishops from all around the empire, and these guys all met, and they argued over what is faith, and about the Holy Trinity, about the nature of Holy Trinity, and whether Jesus is God or not, and so on and so forth. And uh, you know following the end of this council, a creed named Nicene Creed was made the canon, and it was made the official section of Christianity. I couldn't word it nicely, but anyways, so there was this other branch of Christianity, which is called Arianism, after the priest who started all of this, Arius, and it claims that basically Son is also God, but not actually God, and he was actually created after the God, and so on. So I don't know. I'm not a theologian, but basically these guys were really obsessed with this stuff, and they were mad because the Arianists were heretics, and this was a huge controversy, and it kept going on until much later. But basically, Clovis, whether knowingly or unknowingly, picked the right side, because the Bishop of Rome was also defending the Nicene Creed, which meant that now these two guys shared the same branch of the same faith, which would become very, very handy in later times. And yeah, this really helped. This was helpful in establishing good relationships with the Bishop of Rome, who is the Pope. So yeah, that was an important part because bishops of this era held lots of power, and they held secular power as well in states of Gaul and so on, and believing in the same branch or the same religion as the Bishop of Rome, who was residing in the Eternal City and who had both religious and also some secular power over the old capital of the now gone Western Roman Empire, was a good thing, you know. It was a good thing to have good relations. And later in history, during this time of Charlemagne and before that, during his father's time as well, these two would pursue even closer relationships. Franks would defend the Pope against other barbarians, Lombards, to give you a name, and then they would be crowned by the popes. And by the way, that is where the tradition of kings being crowned by the Pope comes from. But that is another story. We are not going to go as far into history of the Franks, not now at least. So yeah, religion was a big factor. Another factor is that the Franks weren't terrible conquerors. They weren't that bad at all, and the Gauls probably welcomed them because, uh, you know, although they were once a fierce and warlike people, these Celts of Gaul, they were subjugated by the Romans and they had been Romanized. They were now Gallo-Romans living in, cities. They were urban dwellers and they couldn't defend themselves. So instead, they were paying taxes to Rome for protection. But Gaul at this point had become a battleground for all the migrating tribes and the Romans and the battles between the tribes and so on. And the Romans just weren't able to protect the Gauls. So, they were paying taxes and not receiving protection. Now, however, with the Franks in charge, they would still be paying taxes and perhaps even less because how could these illiterate bastards, these barbarians, realize they're getting fucked? They could, they probably paid less because it's easier to trick these guys. It will be easier to trick these guys, but that is just my assumption and a wild one at that. So don't quote me on it. Anyways, they will still be paying tax more or less, and they'll be getting protection now because these Franks they were stronger than the Romans and they didn't really have anywhere else to protect, so their attention weren't as divided as that of Romans. They could just stay there and protect Gaul, and then the Gaul would slowly become Frank. Yeah, and the Gauls, the Gallo-Romans, I should say, got along with the Franks, and so did the Franks. They adopted most of the institutions left there by the Romans. They got along well with the local bureaucracy and aristocracy, and they didn't really, get in each other's way. So yeah, they got along well, and they kept running things as they were. They simply provide protection now. So this invasion was not really an invasion, but it was more of a change of the ruler class, of the ruling elite. And these Gallo-Romans weren't the ruling elite either way, so why should they give a fuck? So yeah, excuse my French, by the way. I don't know if it's because I'm talking about the French, but I'm cursing a little bit more than I usually do. And yeah, that was another factor. And yeah, now the Franks were the strongest power in the region, and they will keep getting stronger. And they were also the most prestigious one, and they also had the advantage of converting the Nicene Creed to the official religion of Rome. So yeah, they were in a way a successor state to the Roman Empire. All right, we've explained who were the Franks and why were they important, but that still leaves the question, why did their support matter for our Anglo-Saxon kings who lived in an island across the sea? To put it simply, trade and legitimacy. Let's start with trade. The inhabitants of Britain has been trading with the continental Europe through Gaul since as far back as Bronze Age, and actually even earlier. There was always trade. Trade was crucial for these people, and not only for these people, trade has been crucial for humanity throughout history, because just as a single individual can't make everything on his own and therefore has to trade, so does the tribes. It's just the same situation. Everyone has professions, and even if someone were able to make everything on their own, they couldn't make the best of it. For example, Anglo-Saxons could manufacture arms, but they couldn't do it as well as the French armor was the best, and so on. Such things. For example, the Frankish wine, and the Anglo-Saxons and the Britons as well had some things to trade back, and so on and so forth. So these people traded, and having good relations with the inhabitants of Gaul, which were at this time Franks, meant that you'll be getting better deals, which meant that you'll be getting richer. And as you got richer, more people would flock to your sides, therefore increasing the size of your warband and of your followers. And then, with that now stronger warband, you would be able to bully your neighbors into paying you tribute. And then, with that tribute, you'll get even richer. And you get the idea. So, that is basically the reason why Frankish support was important for these early Anglo-Saxon kings, simply because they needed trade and they needed to get better deals. And the other factor is legitimacy, which explains itself. I don't think I have to go into detail on that. I just talked about how the Merovingians were the most prestigious of the Western Europe. So having marital ties to them, having marriage ties to them, would be a good thing for you. It would give you more legitimacy, more prestige. That's why the Franks mattered, and that's how the Franks affected the Anglo-Saxon politics. For example, the person to introduce Anglo-Saxons to Christianity wasn't Augustine, but rather Bertha, as I've said earlier, the Frankish princess who was married to Ethelbert of Kent. And it was on Frankish request that Pope Gregory the Great actually sent Augustine on his mission. Now, of course, there's a official story as to why Gregory decided to convert the Anglo-Saxons, or at least try to, and Bede tells us. So it goes as this. Pope Gregory is walking in the market of Rome one day, and he sees two slaves, and he really likes them. These men are fair, and they have beautiful hair, and they seem handsome. So Gregory is intrigued, and he asks where they were brought from, and he is told that they come from Britain. And then he asks that, are these guys Christians or still living in heathen era? And he is told that they are still heathens. And then he sighs deeply and says, "Oh, what a pity, man, I hate it. These are such nice people. I can't believe they are possessed by the Prince of Darkness." And then he asks, what are these people called? And they answer, they are called the Angles. And he says, that may well be, for their look is angelical, and also it is fit that they should be joint heirs with the angels in heaven. He makes a clever pun. And then he asks again and says, what is the people called from which the youths were brought here? And they answer him and say that they come from a kingdom named Deiri, which is Deira. And then he says, Deiri is well said, Deira eruti, they shall be rescued from God's wrath and called to the mercy of Christ. And then he asks the name of their king, and they say the king is called Eli, and then he plays on the name again. Bede says this, and then he played on the name in his verse and said, Hallelujah. Yeah, Gregory really wanted to convert these guys. I think he must have loved them. But whether it was purely the Frankish intervention, or perhaps Gregory really saw these slaves and thought to himself, well, you know, handsome lads. It's a shame that these people are heathens. We should, get them to convert. We could use some nice-looking guys in heaven. Some diversity quota he had to fill, perhaps. I don't know. But anyways, once Augustine is, going there, before crossing, he takes some interpreters from amongst the Franks. So that goes on to show just how much the Franks really influenced the early Anglo-Saxon era Britain. And that's all. Thank you for listening. Stay tuned. See you next time.